By the late 15th century, in order to bypass the long and treacherous overland Silk Road, Europeans endeavored to find a sea route to the spices and other luxuries of Asia. In 1497, the Portuguese navigator Vasco da Gama was the first person to sail from Europe to India, establishing a direct route to Asian trade ports for Portugal. Born into a noble Portuguese family around 1460, Vasco da Gama joined the Navy and earned a reputation as a determined navigator by the age of 30. He was so fearless that when the French were disrupting Portuguese shipping, King John II of Portugal sent him to seize French ships as an act of retaliation against the French king. In 1495, King Manuel I inherited the Portuguese throne. He commissioned da Gama to find a sea route from Portugal to India in hopes of controlling trade through the Indian Ocean to Asian ports. At this time, powerful Arab traders enjoyed a monopoly on trade with India and East Asia because they lived along the shores of the Indian Ocean. On July 8, 1497, da Gama departed Portugal with 4 ships. He sailed along the west coast of Africa and successfully rounded the Cape of Good Hope into the Indian Ocean that November. After resting a month in Mozambique, da Gama continued to Mombasa and Malindi in present-day Kenya to establish a Portuguese presence in those East African ports. From there, da Gama crossed the Indian Ocean and on May 20, 1498, reached Calicut, the most important trading center in southern India. But Calcut's leader, Zamorin, was not impressed with da Gama's gifts, and he took offense that the Europeans assumed his people were Christians, when in fact they were Hindus. Da Gama's attempts to establish a trade relationship with Calcut for Portugal failed. Da Gama left Calcut just 3 months after arrival. Unfortunately, he departed during monsoon season. The return voyage took nearly a year, and only 54 of the crew's original 170 members survived. Still, da Gama was greeted as a hero. After all, he was the first European to successfully navigate from Europe to India and open the trade route for Portugal. 3 years later, da Gama was ready for a second trip to India, this time with 20 ships and the king's command that he ensure kingdoms throughout the Indian Ocean agreed to trade with Portugal. So, da Gama attacked Arab trade ships, threatened to burn African ports that refused to swear loyalty to King Manuel, and forged alliances with the rulers of Cochin and Goa, Zamorin's enemies in India. Finally, da Gama bombarded Calcut itself as revenge for Zamorin's previous rejection. Da Gama returned to Portugal in October of 1503. He was richly rewarded for his efforts and for the next 20 years advised the king on matters pertaining to India. During this time, Portugal established numerous colonies in East Africa and India. In 1524, King John III appointed him as Portuguese viceroy in India. He traveled there to investigate the growing corruption of the Portuguese government. It was da Gama's last trip. He died in Cochin in December 1524. Da Gama's historic voyages from Portugal to India successfully opened the door to Portuguese colonialism in Africa and Asia. Just 2 years after da Gama reached India, Portugal claimed Brazil in South America, making it the first global empire in history. The Portuguese Empire lasted until 2002, when it granted sovereignty to its last remaining colony. The port city of Vasco da Gama in Goa, India is named after him, as is the crater Vasco da Gama on the Moon.